Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the U.S. Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to what we think is truly a special episode of Crime Redefined. If you saw the Netflix series, I Just Killed My Dad, then our guest today, Jarrett Ambeau, needs no introduction.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dion, just in case, I'm going to go ahead and give that introduction. So Jarrett Ambeau is a criminal defense attorney in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he happens to specialize in forensic DNA evidence. Jarrett is the defense attorney for Anthony Templet, who's the subject of the Netflix series, I Just Killed My Dad. And Dion, I guess we better give that spoiler alert that you probably want to watch the series before listening to this interview.
That's right. We're going to get inside information from Jarrett, both about the Templet case and what it was like working on the Netflix series. I'm really looking forward to digging in deeper into this disturbing case with someone who was at the center of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, if you've seen I Just Killed My Dad, you'll know that Jarrett was featured prominently. So before we jump in with Jarrett, we better give a little background on the basic facts of the Anthony Templet case. So this all started in 2019, and Bert Templet was shot and killed by his 17-year-old son, Anthony AJ Templet, in their Louisiana home. Now, Anthony freely admitted that he shot his biological dad, and, you know, his reason was that he was in fear for his life.
That's right. And as there always is, there was, of course, much more to the story.
Indeed.
It was discovered that Anthony's biological mother was living in Texas, and that Bert Templet had always told Anthony that she was a drug addict and wanted nothing to do with him.
What a manipulator.
However, it turned out that Bert had abducted Anthony when he was just 5 years old.
Yeah, now Bert, he's no Ward Cleaver. I mean, his treatment of Anthony is really horrible.
Psychotic.
I mean, he didn't allow Anthony to get an education. He would claim to everybody on the outside that Anthony's being homeschooled, but that wasn't taking place. On top of that, he didn't even take Anthony to the doctor or the dentist. So, Dion, it's pretty clear that he abducted Anthony not because he, loved him or wanted to raise him, but really rather, it was a control move against Anthony's biological mother, Teresa. On top of that, Bert was he was drinking and drugging heavily. He was extremely controlling. And as time went on, he became more and more paranoid.
That's right. And as more and more facts came out, it became clear who the real victim was. Anthony, unfortunately, was facing life in prison. However, his super lawyer, Jarrett Ambeau, was not about to let that happen. Eventually, he was able to persuade the district attorney to reduce charges to negligent homicide, which resulted in Anthony being sentenced to probation.
Yeah, that's some excellent lawyering. So with those basic facts in mind, let's go ahead and let Jarrett fill in the rest of the details. And he's actually going to give us an update on how Anthony Templet is doing today. So buckle up, everybody. This is going to be a wild one. Well, Jarrett, we really appreciate your time today helping us to dig into the harrowing story of Anthony Templet. Welcome to Crime Redefined.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I'm guessing this case, or maybe not, really rocked your world. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. I mean, I don't want to pretend like this case was any more difficult than anything else I do. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've thousands of felony cases. And so, we believe in our clients and we fight for them like crazy men. And this is not atypical for us in terms of, just what's out there in the felony criminal defense world. That's just the truth of it, is that there are some meaningful stories and meaningful fights to be had. And hopefully we're doing that every day.
Fair point. So before we get into Anthony's case, we wanted to have our listeners get to know you a little bit better. So, of course, the first thing I have to ask is about your specialty in forensic DNA evidence. Jarrett, can you kind of explain to us what drew you to really digging deep into DNA, and what have you done to sort of distinguish yourself from other attorneys in terms of your level of understanding and expertise when it comes to forensic DNA evidence?
Sure. So early in my practice, I was a young attorney, not by age, but by practice number of years. I was assigned a first-degree murder case that had a death penalty, and I wasn't death penalty qualified. I was a public defender at the time, and they brought an older attorney in that has been death penalty qualified, and I stayed on as second chair. Eventually, the DA would abandon the death penalty portion of it, but I stayed on. And there was some DNA in the case, some mitochondrial and YSTR DNA. And the older attorney didn't know anything about it. I had a scientific interest since I was young, and so I decided to educate myself, read some books, figure out how to do the cross-examination. And I think a combination of involving myself and some of the positive feedback I got about the cross-examination led me to think, well, maybe I'll be pretty decent at this. Maybe I should put a little more time and effort into it. So I got a master's degree in forensic DNA and serology while practicing law, and have now been qualified as an expert in forensic DNA interpretation in the Louisiana district courts a couple of times. I'm most effective, I think, at cross-examining the state's expert and direct examining a defense expert, but I can be called to the stand. I was just on the stand last week in a case talking about probable.
Wow. Well, my gosh, you jumped in the deep end. If your first case had mitochondrial and YSDRs, that's a baptism by fire.
It is. It was difficult. It's difficult. Look, I mean, you guys, I mean, I don't know how much criminal defense you guys have done, but it is, it's difficult. You get DNA, and a lot of times you just want to look at your client and be like, wow, man, this is overwhelming. Like, what are we supposed to do here? I'm not a scientist, So, I couldn't sustain that. I couldn't live with that as a practitioner, and thought I've got to educate myself. I've got to understand this material and help the community understand the material. And so that's what I've done.
So let's keep digging into your background here. And as you know, we just passed the anniversary of 9/11. And I noticed on one of your social media posts that you enlisted 40 days after the attack. Can you break down what 9/11 stirred up in you and give us a description of your military career, posts and location, anything foreign?
Sure. I'm an older guy. I'm 52 years old. I was born in 1969. And I recall Vietnam. I recall that as a child, watching that occur. My grandfathers were both World War II vets and had volunteered to go when Pearl Harbor had occurred. And so when 9/11 happened,
it's in your blood.
Yeah, my natural tendency was, why not me? Like, well, why am I special? Sure, I have a lot of plans. Sure, I want to do a lot of things in life. I was finishing up my undergraduate degree as an older man for the sole purpose of going to law school, and I thought, well, yeah, so were a lot of people who volunteered for World War II and died in combat. I mean, I'm not special, man. Like, what? Somebody came over here and attacked us, and I've always talked big. I'm not going to fight a foreign war, some foreign soil, but if somebody attacked us, man, I'd pick up arms and get busy. And they did. So it was like, well, now it's time to put up or shut up. So I put up. Can you talk about some of the posts? Where you're stationed? Yeah, so I joined the reserves. I went in 40 days after 9/11. I just decided one afternoon I'm going to join the military. I didn't tell my wife. That maybe was a bad idea.
I guess.
So I didn't tell her. I just went and signed up and came back and said, "Look, I'm head." I was that was October 21st, 2001. And I told her, I said, "Look, in January I'm heading out to basic training as a 29 at that time 30-year-old man." So
and that was your current wife, Jarrett?
No, ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
And,
you don't have to tell us, but I'm dying to know how that conversation went.
Yeah, it was, man. I have to say, it was a calling for me. I felt driven for it. I felt like it was something in my soul, something that I felt like I had to do, man. Something that was in my soul, like something that said, man, you're willing to stand up, and some people aren't. There's no shame in that. But those that are willing to stand up have to stand up when they're called upon. So that's what I did. I was like, okay, let's go. So it was tough for her. It was a tough conversation, but she understood. She knew me. She understood who I was.
Well, Jarrett, in the Netflix series, you were obviously very candid about your childhood and your upbringing. And to the extent that you're comfortable, can you share a little bit more with us and kind of how your upbringing, number one, drew you to law, and then ultimately how it allowed you to more effectively empathize with Anthony Templet?
Sure. So I came from a very successful, very well-established family on both sides, my mother and my father, but my dad, my mom got wrapped up in the drug use of the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And it went awry. They took the left turn when everybody else went right. And my dad started dealing drugs and selling drugs. And he always had a job. He was in the unions. He was a pipe fitter, a welder, but he, as a side deal, he sold drugs and imported them from Mexico. I mean, he just did a lot of, some not so great stuff, not being a very productive and upstanding member of the community for sure. But they were loving parents. They never denied us hugs and affection, but they were also negligent parents. And so there was a lot of times where there wasn't food or electricity or air conditioning in the house, or
Oh, wow.
they were just drug addicts, and they really struggled, man. And so I learned to be an adult as a child. I learned that I had to take care of myself, even at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. My brothers were teenagers, and they weren't super concerned. And they were just out being teenagers, not their fault, right? They're just being teenagers. And so I ended up hanging out with my mom a lot. I was 9, 10, 11 years old. I was 11 when they got sober, when they went to treatment. But I was, at that time when it got really, really bad, it was me and my mom essentially, and my dad was off, somewhere partying and playing around, working, but at the same time partying and playing around. And so I just learned to be a little adult, man. And so what happened when they went to treatment was I decided, well, now I can be a kid. I'm off the reservation. And then I ended up going to treatment at 16 years old because I'd kind of done the same doggone thing. So my parents are great people. They've been married 60 years, 3 weeks ago, 60 years. They stayed together, man. They figured it out. But
Incredible.
They got sober, man. Like in 81, it wasn't continuous, but they really started working on themselves and started to try to figure out, how can we be better people? How can we get past this addiction? How can we get past this behavior and stop violating the law? And they did. They figured it out, man.
Are you the youngest?
I am the baby. Yeah.
And then how many siblings?
5 and 6 years older than me.
I'm sorry?
My brothers are 5 and 6 years older than me.
So 3 boys?
Yeah, 3 boys.
How did you first end up representing Anthony?
So I was, I'm a very established public attorney in the area. I do a lot of public cases. I'm on the news a lot. I get hired by, police officers who get arrested, that kind of stuff, very, very public stuff. And of the big cases already that occur, if 4 or 5 cases are in the news, I have 3 of those clients. It's just who I am locally. And so when this case broke, there was an outreach on my Facebook to, hey, go help this kid. You're the guy.
Oh.
You're the man. You're the guy that should go help this guy. And this young man, this kid. And I got contacted by not only the public in that way, but also a couple of, so Shayna Landry, who's in the documentary, she's the geneticist that was trying to find his mom.
Yeah.
She does, population genetics and that kind of thing. In her Facebook post where she was fishing for information, multiple people were saying, tagging me and saying, Jarrett, you should
Get this guy. Right.
Jarrett, you should look into this.
Yep.
And then I had a judge, who's now a judge, was an attorney friend of mine then, whose wife was related to the family in some way. And he actually called me and said, hey, my wife's seen that you've been tagged in this thing. It's part of her family. This kid, this is real. This kid, we think the reports of abuse are real. It's not made up nonsense. Man, would you mind just contacting the stepmom and go and talk to this kid? And I said, sure, of course, I'd be happy to do that. Now, I want to be clear that there was already national attention. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt this. You guys have ever sort of felt like it was just something you had to do, like something drew me to this case. And I have to admit that part of that was self-interest. Like I felt like something was here, like something was going to happen. I don't know how to put that in.
We get it. There's a case we're working on right now. We get that.
I felt drawn to it. And look, my purpose in life is to serve others. And so I wanted to go and serve this kid and do everything I could for him. But if I were to tell you that there was no self-interest here or no thought of self-interest, that would be a lie. That would not be true. I thought there's something here and I need to get into this case. I just felt drawn to it. And so I called the stepmom. I told her who I was. I gave her my website. I'm going to look me up, Google me. You'll see who I am. And if you're interested, I'll go sit and talk to him. And I went and talked to him. And man, at that first meeting, he was so unfunctional as a person. Just the ability to communicate, the ability to connect. I mean, I'm a professional I'm a professional connector, right? Like I tell people I'm a trial attorney. I know how to build immediate, deep rapport with people in 30 seconds. I mean, it's just who I am. And I could not connect with this kid for anything because he was just completely unavailable. And I thought, holy cow, man, this abuse thing is real. I mean, this kid he's obviously got some PTSD. He's obviously experiencing right now just a massive lack of trust for me sitting in front of him. And I'm not here to do anything but help the kid. I mean, like I'm here to offer him, what's essentially maybe, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 worth of defense for free. And he has no connection to that at all. And it was astounding. I was immediately, because of that, it touched my heart like, holy shit, man, something's happened to this kid and he needs some help, man. So that drew me immediately.
You really set up my next question for me. And this is something that really stuck out. In this series, it seemed like Anthony's eyes, for me, told a story. In the initial police interview, he would constantly avert his gaze. And I think this was misinterpreted by the detective and initially in that interview as guilt. Was he like that the first time you met him? I guess you've kind of touched on that a little bit. And do you think that behavior was a coping mechanism or a survival skill being in Bert's house?
Absolutely.
Like to not make eye contact
100%.
with him for fear of retribution of some kind.
Well, for fear of immediate demonstration of who was in charge, right?
Exactly. He wasn't challenging himself. That's my point.
Yeah. Like we know and I'm not trying to be gender biased or anything here, but we know as men,
alpha male.
When you walk up to a guy and you look him in the face, and you square your shoulders to
That's
it.
right.
That in physically, that's a challenging, right? It's the same reason that when we talk to juries, I will turn my body sideways and talk to them a lot. I won't actually square up my shoulders to a jury because it's aggressive, right? So physical position means something. And when I spoke to him, his physical position was completely meek. It was completely submissive. It was, he had the top of his arms were about as big around as the bottom of his arms. He was physically slight, very, very almost malnourished. And you could tell that he was very used to being completely submissive to whatever person was talking to him because he didn't want to challenge, right? If he challenged his dad in any way, if it looked like he was challenging his dad, that invited violence, right? Or invited control, whatever his dad was in the mood for at that moment. And so he knew what he was conditioned to do was to avoid any and all confrontation, even the slightest physical confrontation. And he manifested that like 100% in that first meeting. It was really something. It was something to behold.
Yeah, for me, it was really noticeable. Like right out of the gate, his eyes were just, his fidgety, his fingers were tweaking, and his eyes were all over, and he just, he was just groomed into that, and I could see the detective taking that as a sign of guilt.
Yeah, he's still a bit like that. We did a interview with him the other day, a podcast, just talking to him, and we published it so that people get a little follow up with him. And when he begins to talk to me, he closes his eyes. It's almost like he doesn't know what to do with himself still. He's 2 years out. He still doesn't know what to do with himself in terms of how to communicate.
Well, Jarrett, I believe I heard you mention in an interview that there was actually a very specific reason and outcome that you had in mind when you decided to participate in the Netflix project. Can you describe what that was and just kind of how the whole Netflix thing came to be?
Sure. So we were contacted by a guy. He was one of these line producers, right, who goes out and finds the story. And I actually ignored him for a couple of months and just blew him off, right? I mean, I literally just blew him off. Like, I'm not answering that phone call. And he called back about the third or fourth time, I guess. And I told my staff, I was like, all right, put him on the hold. I'm going to chase him off. I don't want him calling my office, over and over again. We're busy. We're busy doing stuff.
Exactly. Doing real work.
Yeah. I don't want to waste my time. So he got on the phone with me. He's like, okay, I know you're busy, and he told me like, here's who I am. Here's who we are. Look us up on the internet. And I pulled it up and they were legit. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll spend a few minutes talking to this guy. And he came down, he filmed a little with us. And I told him right up front, I said, look, I've agreed to take this case for no money. So it's not ethical for me to take any money from you. So I want to establish that up front, that I don't want any money from your production company. I don't want any money from you guys eventually sell this to some network and they buy it. I don't want any money from that. It's just not ethical. Like I would not feel comfortable taking money from this situation, having volunteered, having told this kid that I was going to take it pro bono and made the public representation that that's what I was doing. I said, but if you're going to use me and my time and this kid's life to make your money, make some money for you, then I want you to do something for him. And that is, we need an expert in this case, and I want you to pay for it. That was my deal.
That was nice.
That was my deal. I'm like, I'll give you my time, and I'll let you have access to my client. We also did sign a contract with some very clear breach rules about that they couldn't publish anything until the trial matter was adjudicated either by plea or by trial. So they couldn't publish any information. I gave them access during the defense with the caveat that they could not publish anything until the trial level work was done.
No, that's great.
And then they ended up giving me, I think they ended up paying me $5,000 for some materials, then some pictures and such, just as an exchange of materials. And then I passed that $5,000 on to the expert, Dr. Lawing, and then I paid her an additional fee out of my pocket to cover her fees.
That's great. I actually want to ask you, just before we move on, a quick question. It was kind of hard to hear. When she was talking about AJ, she mentioned something about where he was in his development. I don't think it was a school, but basically his development. What age did she put him at?
That's an interesting question. I don't specifically recall there were so many hundreds of hours of filming. I don't specifically recall what was in the documentary. I will tell you that he had math on about a third grade level. He read on about a seventh grade level. I mean, he was developmentally a 10 or 12-year-old kid.
Okay.
And you could talk to him, and I've raised 5 adults and I have 1 7-year-old. I've raised a lot of children. You can actually look at him and sort of interact with him at that time. And he came across as that kind of like a 5th or 6th grader, right? Like a kid that was just in middle school, right? That was the sophistication that he came to the conversation with. He was clearly smart, just like you can tell a 10 or 11-year-old smart when you come into contact with him. Oh, this is an intelligent kid. He's got the ability to function and process information quickly and answer you. He certainly has always presented that to me. I don't think that he is developmentally disabled. I think that he's that he's a sharp kid, but information and knowledge-wise, he was just so deprived that he was functionally a child.
Let's go behind the scenes a little bit about formulating your defense. And first of all, I'd like to know who was on your team, if you want to share that, and then how agonizing was it trying to figure out how best to help Anthony?
So the local public defender's office, which had been assigned to him prior to my getting involved, you all know that happens very, very quickly. I asked them to stay on and stay involved so that we could continue to use their resources. And so we had some resources from them in terms of accused resources or abuse victim resources. I had a friend of mine who was another attorney I had done some work with. And I asked him to involve himself just to help me appear for certain court dates and such. Both the public defender's office and him, neither of them wanted to be on the documentary, so they sort of summarily refused to do any filming or anything by personal choice, even though they were invited to do so multiple times. But that was the team essentially. And of course, I have a small firm, but I have attorneys that work for me and support staff. And so, we put the weight of our firm behind him for sure and used our resources in the most effective way.
So that conference table shot was a blend of your team and the public defender's office?
No, interestingly enough, that's actually my 2 best friends. They're brothers. I practiced with those guys. And it was one of their offices. They wanted to use one of them is a very successful medical malpractice personal injury attorney. We used his office for all the shots. I don't know why they thought that looked better. His office is very, very nice. That's why. But those guys are my best friends. And that's something that we do. So in fact, I just did it this afternoon. We have a jury trial starting Monday. My partner's trying a case. And we do this functional process whereby we take the facts of the case and the theory of defense, and we sort of do what I can only describe as maybe like a reductio, like a Descartesian reductio. Let's get to the bones. Let's get to the meat of this defense. Like what meaningfully, emotionally, what is this defense about? Like what's the substance of it beyond the facts? So we do this reduction down to that, and then we create a set of terms, a set of words to use, a set of phrases, and a way to get the jury thinking in terms of the defense theory without actually telling them the defense theory. And what we think that does, and what I've seen that happen in courtrooms, in fact, we watched it happen in the mock trial in Anthony's case with the mock jurors. What happens is the jurors will generate the defense theory themselves. And if you can get one or two jurors to generate your case theory, in other words, get them thinking like a defense attorney and generate it from their emotional state, they'll own it like it's because they made it up themselves. They're the progenitors of this thinking. They'll own it forever and they'll never come off of it. And so what y'all saw, what the documentary showed was the first vote of that jury. They were 5-1 manslaughter, not guilty. 3 hours later, they were unanimous not guilty. And the one not guilty, she used our entire case theory, the thing I do in every jury trial, the thing we've developed over 57 jury trials, felony jury trials, the thing we've developed over time. She used all of our thinking, all of our words, all of our phrasing. She used all of that in the jury room to convince the other 5 to come around to not guilty.
So you've got to create soldiers on the ground to spread your message and help you out.
You bet. Yeah. I'm trying to get jurors to connect emotionally with my client and my theory of defense. So when they walk into that room, they own it in a way that makes them our champions in that room.
So let's talk a little bit about the battlefield that this case played out on. You know, you'd mentioned that Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate. Can you set the stage a little bit about kind of the workings of the justice system in Louisiana that may be somewhat unique, and how that presented a challenge for you in AJ's case?
Sure. We're a very, very conservative state. And this is a very, very Catholic, very religious community, very Christian community. Lots of people in power in the Catholic Church has a ton of power in Louisiana. It's just a holdover from the French influence. And the truth is that arguing these kinds of cases is very difficult because there's this prevalence of an eye for an eye, right? Someone's dead, someone has to pay. And it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that it was justified. The law may say it's justified, but the big book says it's not. Right?
Gotcha.
So we know we have to fight those fights. I mean, that's the jurors we have, right? And whatever you may think about that, that's what's going on. And so the guy that I brought in, that's my friend, had just tried a similar kind of case, of course, different facts, but a same abuser coming back and killing the person who abused them. He just tried one about a year before that, where this young girl who'd been raped all of her life by this stepdad. She gets out of the house, her and her boyfriend decide they're going to go extract some justice, and they go over and kill him. The boy got life in prison and she got 20 years.
Ooh.
And because there was no space for justification, right? There's no space, there's no thinking in terms. Now look, different facts, obviously every case is different, but that's what we're in, right? And then we're in and you might be surprised by this. I don't know if your listeners are going to understand this. I'll try to explain it. There's no diminished capacity defense in the state of Louisiana. So you're either competent to stand trial, which is you understand the proceedings and you can assist in your defense, or you're incompetent. And that's it. There's no other mental defense in the state of Louisiana. And so you're stuck with, as a criminal defense attorney, if your client's affected by PTSD or affected by mental infirmary or has something going, you can't even, it's not even admissible in the case, with one clear exception. And that's the exception of battered woman syndrome that had been established about 2 years prior to my case with Dr. Lawing, who had been assigned by the Louisiana Supreme Court to investigate whether or not they should sort of break the seal on diminished capacity defenses. She was the expert for the Supreme Court, and when they first established what was the only, at this point, diminished capacity defense in the state of Louisiana, which is battered woman syndrome. So it was a tough environment, right? Because now you have this brand new sort of defense out there. And of course, the prosecutors don't want you to just sneak in some fancy defense and walk some guilty person. So you're fighting that fight. When we walked into Hiller Moore's office, the elected district attorney, when we walked into his office and he offered us negligent homicide. Dana Cummings and I had talked in the hallway prior to walking in, and she was still on manslaughter.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. She never got off manslaughter. In fact, when he said negligent homicide, it was pretty obvious he had not told her that prior to that meeting, because she agreed. It's her boss, she's going to back him up,
right?
Obviously. But she was not, she wasn't privy to that was the offer was going to be. And look, we were in that meeting for an hour and a half. I made the argument to him, right? I basically made the closing argument, no one's going to, this is the closing argument they show in the documentary. No one's going to say that he was abused other than the two people that lived with him and him and the expert. But no one is going to say they want him put in jail or that they're surprised by it either. Every single person from friend to family member to coworkers said, yeah, I'm not surprised that happened. So everyone had a sense that something was going on. And I told him, he's the Leicester District Attorney and I are friends, and he knows the kind of jury trial attorney I am. And I said, I'm going to beat you. I'm not going to take this to trial, and I'm going to acquit this kid. And we can do that, or we can do what's in his best interest, and we can get him some services, and we can put him on probation where he'll be successful, and he doesn't have to risk life in jail. And we're willing to do that, and that's what he made the offer. So.
I'm sure the doc people were building up the drama in this. But I want to go back to what you were feeling when you started hearing the response and the reactions from your presentation to the mock jury.
So it was interesting, when we made that presentation, we sat back, we had a kind of like a little video village. So they were in a different room, and then we were watching them in another room and watching them deliberate. And, it's tough, man. It's so tough to watch what jurors will latch onto, what they won't, the facts they choose to think they're important, the facts they'll completely disregard. And it's frustrating because, as you all know, now you're completely powerless. You're just watching it happen, right? And everything, all the work to have affected that discussion had to have occurred previously in the courtroom, And so it just feels so unbelievably powerless. And when every time someone would say something like that, young lady who was just fabulous. She was the one with the short hair. She really was great. She was the last person to come to not guilty. But she's, I understand what she's talking about, right? She's like, someone died, so someone has to pay. I was like, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Like, that's human. I can't argue. I can't say that's wrong, because it's not. We want there to be natural consequences when someone dies. But we also have to understand that sometimes it's justified. That's real. And we have to figure that out. And so, man, it was really interesting to watch. I've done a lot of focus groups, but I had never done a full mock trial like that. And it was incredible to watch those jurors go through that process. And
how long was the process? How long were you there?
We started about 8:00 in the morning. I think they came to a decision about 6:00 that night.
Wow.
5:30 to 6 that night. And we presented the evidence to them in PowerPoint form. This is what this person would say. And the prosecutor would get up and say, this is the information that I would elicit from this person, and I would argue this. And I'd get up and say, well, this is the cross-examination I would undertake. And my argument, relative to this testimony would be this. And then we did that, over and over again. And we did an opening and closing argument. So we wanted to present the case in the most sort of fair to Anthony way, which was strong prosecution case, strong defense case. We put it together like it would have been put together to a jury, in open court.
Well, of course, genealogy, and specifically genetic genealogy, is all the rage in the headlines in criminal investigations these days. And usually it's a case of identifying the perpetrator or perhaps the victim. But here in AJ's case, sort of old school classical genealogy research played a huge role in blowing this thing wide open. Jarrett, can you talk a little bit about the work of AJ's co-worker at the nursery, and of course, Shayna Landry in really blowing this case wide open, and, kind of what they did?
Yeah, so Shayna was great because she found Anthony's mom, she found the family, and finding out from them led to then finding out that Bert had a previous criminal history, which then supported some of the allegations of abuse in ways that we could not have done so otherwise. So she certainly played a central role in that. in finding out his history, which was important, right? Important for us because the kind of person he was not sharing his history with his wife, Susan. He just wasn't, and Anthony didn't have any of his history. So it was, he had a veil, right? I mean, he had this sort of curtain of his actual life. And behind that curtain, we didn't have any access. We didn't know what was there. And so she was really central in us finding a lot of that information. And Elena Fennell, who was his co-worker, I mean, she was absolutely fabulous. When I tell you that it's a good soul, like a decent and good human being, she, no DNA, no criminal experience, no legal anything. She's just a good person. She came to every court date, her and Shayna Landry both, every court date, every appearance, they would show up, just be there to support Anthony. And I tell you, she even offered at some point for Anthony to live with her family and be a part of their family. But she was just, I mean, we come into contact with a lot of bad folks in my line of work I do in criminal defense. And so a lot of times, you can lose faith in humanity, and you see, just some of the worst things we'll do to each other. And to see her, to see how she handled the situation, how she went at this with just a loving and kind and generous heart, it was incredible. She just cannot say enough good things about her.
We're huge fans of hers, her energy, and you could tell first interview that came up, she was not going to let this go.
Yeah, no question, man. She was, and she's genuinely like that. That wasn't a put on. They didn't make her up to be something she wasn't. That's who she is.
I want to talk about some of the intangibles and how important they were into resolving this case. By that, I mean, the way that you were able to stir up compassion in the DA's office, or that's how it appeared or was presented in the documentary, with your dedication.
Yeah, it's chipping away. I mean, you guys do criminal defense?
Yeah.
It's chipping away. It's almost like that adage about hitting singles every day. You just got to get in there and hit singles, man. You got to chip away at this sort of preconceived notion by prosecutors that people are guilty and they deserve to be in jail. And that process doesn't happen overnight. I don't care what kind of information you have, almost nothing changes a prosecutor's mind instantly, right? And so because they're just conditioned they have a mission, they're doing their job, they have a duty to protect the public and uphold the law, and they feel empowered by that, patriotic almost, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to sort of get at it and tell them, you have to change their frame of thinking, almost their point of view to, what, the constitutional thing to do, the right thing to do, the good and just thing to do here is to see it from another point of view.
That's a tough balance.
Yeah, it takes time, man. It takes time. It took a lot of time for us to get them to come around. And again, I'll tell you, Dana Cummings never really came around until the end. I mean, until they took the doggone plea. I mean,
it seems like she was like towards the end. I don't know. I got the sense that she was looking for, like, you were winning her over, and she was looking for an off ramp, and you gave it to her. That's my sense of it.
Yeah, that's an inaccurate retelling of history. None of her interviews occurred until the case was complete. And that's the director being very, very good at asking her questions and framing what they wanted to use of her during the storytelling. Because she, and I'm not mad at Dana, she's a prosecutor, and she's very good. I'm not in any way saying there's anything wrong with her. She's just a prosecutor, and that's what
that's what they do.
Mind, right? I mean, that's how she goes at it,
Well, one of the many, I guess, shocking aspects in the documentary was how, for some reason, there was no crosstalk between the authorities in Baton Rouge and Texas regarding Teresa being awarded custody of Anthony. Jarrett, how is it possible in this day and age of computers and databases that a mistake like that can be made, and how common of an occurrence is something like that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because sometimes we were lulled into this idea that today our current exchange of information and systems are accurate to what it was 16, 17 years ago. And the truth is that it was not. That it was very, very easy, even just 15 years ago, for there to be two complete separate proceedings in two courts in the same state, much less neighboring states, where without someone saying this is occurring, where the other court just not knowing. I mean, look, a lot of people want to blame judges, and I've heard a little bit of, how'd that judge do that? It's not the judge's fault. It's doggone attorneys, right? It's my job. It's our job to tell the judge what's going on. And if the judge doesn't get that information, the judge is not going to go do any investigation into what's happening. And unfortunately for Teresa, she just ran out of money to pay an attorney. And so she didn't have it. Teresa and her mom and her sister are what we all maybe like to ignore in our society, are just abject poverty. I mean, they struggle to keep the power on, get enough money together to buy food, and their luxuries in life are gas money. I mean, gas money to get in the car and drive somewhere is a luxury. That's a treat. And so for her to have spent the money to drive to Louisiana and to go into a courtroom and pay what are, to them, exorbitant fees for filing, $200, $300, $400 for filing documents in a civil case, it was just very, very quickly way beyond anything she could imagine, right? And so, a lot of people have made a lot of, well, she's, she should have done more. She should have fought more. But I don't think people can really comprehend what it's like to be that poor, to live in that kind of poverty, and what that feels like when you come up against what you perceive to be the power of the state. Because what her perception is, I'm fighting the judge, not him. And to take on the judge is just so far beyond anything she could imagine to do that she gave up. I mean, she did everything she knew how to do, and then got exhausted by the fact that Bert was an engineer and making $100,000+ a year.
Yeah, it was tough to watch that. I had complete compassion and really felt for that family. I mean, you could see it. For people to judge them that's just not right.
It's a misunderstanding, I think.
Absolutely.
Misunderstanding of humanity, of humanness, man,
We talk to people and interview people all across the country, and we're always fascinated and disturbed by incarceration conditions in various jurisdictions. At one point, Anthony was transferred to an adult facility. Would you recap for us why he was moved and then what the conditions were like at that particular facility?
Sure. So the law in Louisiana is when a juvenile commits certain crimes, the juvenile can be moved into the adult system just by finding of probable cause. So a preliminary examination finding of probable cause by the court for a particular crime, right? And this second-degree murder is one of those crimes. So as soon as the court found probable cause for second-degree murder, he was moved automatically into the adult system and transferred to an adult jail. Now, because he was a juvenile and because he was in the capital city in Baton Rouge and in the Baton Rouge jail, they actually moved him to a jail in North Louisiana, which is about 3.5 hours away from Baton Rouge, which was a much, much, much nicer facility. And when I say nicer, I mean safer, more
relatively
hometown. Right, exactly. Of course, it wasn't nice, right? It's still a terrible place to be, but it wasn't as dangerous and as run down as the Baton Rouge jail is. And so he stayed in Baton Rouge jail for a little bit of time. Like every time he would come to court, he would complain because essentially what he was doing was sleeping on a floor with a blanket and a pillow in a holding cell with a bunch of other guys every time he came to town. And it would last, he would appear for a day, but he would be here for 2 or 3 days. And then we'd ask the court, can you hold him here so we can go visit him? And he would be like, no, please don't hold me here. Please send me back to Winsboro, to this other jail, because I don't want to stay in the Baton Rouge jail. It's just so terrible. So he really struggled with that. And he stayed in jail for about 6 months. Now that hometown jail, the one up north, I mean, it's hometown, like the ladies in the front bring food to the prisoners to do. I mean, it's hometown jail.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was much, much better.
Well, at this point, it seems like, the dust is starting to settle a little bit in this whole ordeal. And we recently watched the wonderful sit-down talk that you had with AJ that, was on YouTube. So we're kind of wondering if you could update us, where is AJ at in his probation? And in your assessment, I mean, how is he doing overall? And what do you think his prognosis is?
Yeah, he's doing good. He's kind of struggling with the education part, frankly. COVID has interfered with that pretty dramatically.
Oh, right, right.
All of the public resources that he had with regard to his education have sort of shut down or aren't functioning at capacity, and even functioning at all, some of them. And so we've really struggled with getting him his education. And for him, unlike a kid who maybe went to school and didn't really pay attention, he's never been schooled. So he actually needs a real education. Like he needs guidance and tutoring, and he needs to learn. And so he must be in an environment where he can do so. And we've finally just gotten him into a school program that's going to serve those needs for him. And our goal now between he and I is for the next 12 months to get him his GED. And we've got a little schedule, and I want him, I want you to at least spend an hour every week, either in the place studying or at home doing some homework, so that we can continue to make, efforts towards that. In Louisiana, he can be terminated from probation at halftime if he's complied and done everything he's supposed to do, and finished everything he's supposed to finish, and he's been a model citizen, and he has been. So our goal is to get him that GED, which is the last thing he needs to do for his probation, and then to ask the judge to release him from probation at that time, at which time we'll also be able to expunge this arrest and conviction off of his record.
Oh, fantastic. Now, where's the clock at in the 5 years now?
He's at about, I'm going to say he is at 17 or 18 months since his plea.
Oh, okay. So the clock is winding down then for the GED, it sounds like.
It might be a little further than that. No, he's a little further, about 20 months. About 20 months. So we've got about 10 months left for halftime. And so that's where he's at in terms of his learning. And he's doing great. Look, he's met a nice young lady. She's very sweet.
Yeah, she is. That was a fun interview with her.
That was good to see.
To his life, which I think is,
she matched his energy,
Yeah. She, it's funny because you asked how he was doing, and I think, there's always, we could have a 5-hour discussion on what normal is, right?
Right.
We can define normal life.
Right.
But what I've always told him is, Anthony, my wish for you is to just have peace, man. To have a peaceful life where people love you and you're just chill. And I've been very clear with him that, look, your whole life just might be working at the convenience store and playing video games and chilling at the house and being peaceful. And if that's it, well, that's just okay, man.
What an improvement.
Yeah, you don't have to be anything else. You don't have, nobody has an expectation on you that you have to do something, You are free to choose. And you are free to live the life you live. And it's really okay, man. And so he's got some money from a GoFundMe. He has no idea how to deal with that. I've been coaching him up a lot on that. I actually haven't dispersed any of it to him yet. We've kind of been struggling back and forth with the GoFundMe to get the money into my trust account. But I think that's probably a good thing because he's had some time to think about it and consider, from his impression, he's rich and famous.
Right. Yeah. So, I noticed you tuned him up.
Yeah, you kept corralling him a little bit
in the interview.
So I had to tell him, like, not quite.
Let's pump the brakes on that.
Yeah, I want to reel that back in just a touch, and try to.
You dropped that anonymous donor $25K, and I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, that was a pretty stout one. He's also, we talked about it at length, and he's like, I'll be truthful with you though, man. I don't really like to spend money. Like, I don't like to buy big things. And I said, well, that's really great. And I talked about a car. I was like, okay, let's spend let's carve out $15,000 for you to go get a car. And he's like, well, you think we could spend maybe 10? I was like, man, wow, do whatever you want. Like, that's great. So if he keeps that in mind, maybe a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, we'll have a little money still and he'll be able to do something with it, instead of blowing it all on, sweet tarts or whatever.
Right. For sure. Just going back to the terms of the probation real quick. What are some of the other things he has to do? I believe does he have to work full time?
He does have to work full time. He has to get his GED. He has to obviously maintain, follow the law. He has to check in with his probation officer. He doesn't have an ankle monitor or a phone monitor or anything. He does have to check in with his probation officer every couple of weeks. To let them know where he's at, where he's working, what he's doing, how he's progressing. We have regular check-ins with the court where he shows up, and there's a probation officer comes in, and we just have a little check on his progress. He's done fabulously with that. The court's very happy with where he's been.
Great.
He's doing good. He's doing as good as we can expect. In this business, again, You know, my expectations for my life and my expectations for my client's life are completely different. And it's okay. Like neither one of them's right or neither one of them's better. It's just, hey, let's make a set of reasonable expectations for you in your set of circumstances that fits your life.
Right, exactly.
Where you can get some targets and get some milestones, and you can hit those milestones and feel great about it, you know?
You know, he mentioned in your YouTube interview with him that he had moved out from his stepmom's home. Where's he living now?
So he's living with his girlfriend. That relationship with the stepmom had become very, very difficult. And I don't think unjustified. Anthony, you know, maybe had some holdover anger or some frustration.
Sure.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
With the fact that she was there, right? She was involved, right? And what you don't see in the Netflix documentary is after she gets the protective order with Bert in February of that year, she actually sneaks back at the house over and over and over and over again. Some of those surveillance videos we have are actually subsequent to the protective order being in place. And you can see Bert going out and checking the street to make sure nobody's there before he waves her out to the car. And of course, Anthony sees all of this, right?
Yeah.
He's watching all of this happen. He sees the destruction of Bert's life and that it's all caving in around him, but then also sees the stepmom coming over regularly and just pretending like it's all fine. And so you can't take all that history and sort of just wash it away and say,
absolutely not.
Fine now, you know? And so I told him early on, man, you have absolutely no duty to continue your relationship with anyone that you feel uncomfortable with. I mean, again, your life is your life now. And so go and live it in the manner that you want to live it. And I don't want you to feel any pressure to do anything with anyone else. Like, you know, because he needs to understand freedom. He was in a prison in that home and imprisoned by his father. And I think what I wanted him to get immediately was go and live a life of freedom and liberty and worry about the rest of it later. Worry about the details later. You know?
Have there been any after effects of this case for you?
There have been. I mean, I cannot, it is, you know, being a professional speaker, I could tell you just about anything, but I'll tell you that it's very difficult for me to express just how kind and loving and sweet the response has been. So many people, I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands, have contacted me through my various social media and websites and such, just with the kindest words, thanking me, being grateful, you know, maybe a half dozen marriage proposals, whatever.
I have to say, I saw on Anthony's Instagram, somebody was inquiring about your marital status.
Oh my God.
And then we're reading the comments on your YouTube video as well. And you could just see, I mean, the outpouring of support for this, for you and for
Definitely.
Anthony in this case.
Yeah, I'm making light of it, but it's been very touching. It's been very sweet. It's been so kind. And you know, it's funny, man, about a week after the documentary came out, I was, my wife had taken our daughter to school and I was sitting in my house by myself, and I live a blessed life. I'm just absolutely blessed in every possible way. And I'm sitting in the middle of my house and I was just kind of hanging out there. And I just gotten off the phone with someone. I did a Today Show appearance in Australia. And a couple of days prior to that, I'd done a sort of podcast in, I think in somewhere in the UK, in London. And I thought, like, I'm just this old boy from down the bayou. You know? I'm this old cat from Louisiana, man. You know, like,
yeah, but that's part of the charm, you know?
Yeah, like, but I never thought that I would amount to much of anything in the world. And now my story, some story about me, some portion of this story is about Jarrett Ambeau, this human being, and this person that I am. That story has been told all over the world, man. And I just started weeping, man. I was just so touched by the fact that for some reason, some you know, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, blessed me with this opportunity to have told my story to so many people. I just can't imagine, again, that this old boy from down the bayou could tell his story to this many people. It just blows me away.
That's really awesome. Really, you know, awesome.
It goes back to one of your original comments. It was just that this destiny, fate, God, whatever you want to say. It just was. This was meant to be. And I got to ask you a question. How is your wife and your family taking this all in?
Oh, they think it's hilarious. I mean, you gotta, especially my
Are they
brothers,
laughing at
man.
you or with you?
Oh my God, my parents and my brothers, man, they are like, I mean, they're proud, all right? I mean, I have care of me all my life. But I was the irresponsible one, man. My brothers,
Oh my God.
I didn't go to college. I mean, I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade. I got my GED. Like, I didn't even finish high school because I was a rascal, man. And so my family's always been like, who knows what Jarrett's going to do? He's pretty smart, but he just don't want to work. Like, don't want to do anything, And so when this came around, like, and I turned 29 and I was like, I'm going to law school. They were all like, yeah, whatever. Like, you finished high school, man. Like, what, So I think they've been both super proud, but also just kind of blown away by the fact that their little brother, their rascal of a baby in the house has done all this stuff.
Well, I have two brothers, and so I know sibling rivalry, and I hope that you're rubbing it in their face.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, they're very, very successful. One of them's got 2 PhDs, lives in.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and the other one's a very successful, a tax professional. I mean, we're talking about people that have been very, very successful in their lives.
Still, spike the ball.
Oh yeah, that's right. So like, don't think I'm.
Yeah, but do you have a Netflix series?
That's exactly right. I'm thinking about putting a Netflix sign in my front yard. They come over. I'm like,
Hey, speaking of that, Jarrett, can you take us behind the scenes a little bit? I mean, what was it like working on the documentary, including, what kind of time commitment was it for you?
It was a good bit of time. I don't mind. I knew in the front end that I was going to be some time, right? And I'm the kind of person that I'm certainly have that personality where once I've committed to something, I just don't bother about it after that. Like I'm not a whiner or a complainer. My wife talks to me all the time about, I'm just like, I'm one of those people that's just always happy. I'm always content. And it's because once I make a decision to do something, I'm just not going to complain about it. I'm just going to go and do it. It doesn't matter. Like, whatever. And so I didn't stress. And even the producers all the time, they'd be like, man, thank you for your time. Like, it's cool, man. Like, I told you I'd do it. Like, don't stress about it. I'm here. It's funny though, because some of what I said in the documentary makes me kind of look like like maybe I'm this egomaniacal, I don't know. I think I made some comment about getting 100 bar fights or something. And some people were giving me some lip about it. He's trying to be a tough guy.
Well, you didn't say how many you won though.
No. It's funny because it doesn't matter, right? Like I've said this many times, and I said that in the context of really talking about how I was a rascal. Like I did all this crazy stuff in my life. Like I wasn't real, like I wasn't really squared away for a long time. And I say these things sometimes to people for purposes, like for a reason. Like I tell people all the time, look, it's not about winning or losing the fight. It's about getting in the fight. Like I'm willing to fight. Like I'm willing to go into the courtroom and fight.
Right.
Winning or losing is completely immaterial. Like I get it that it's material to my client, but it doesn't enter my calculation. Like I'll go and lose. I mean, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I lose all the time. Like it's what I do. But because the government is incredibly powerful and has endless resources, and
true.
These cases are tough sometimes, and they get to choose, oh, by the way, every case that we go to trial on. So of course they choose the stuff they can win, right? Why would you go to a trial on a case you can lose? And so, it's never been for me, and I've said this before in the right context, take an ass whipping, give an ass whipping, I don't give a shit. But if you give me some lip, we're going to find out. That's just how it goes, man. Like, if you challenge me, we're going to fight. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing because I've got myself in trouble with that. And that's the context I talked about that bar fights. Like, I've been in a lot of bar fights. I've been in a few bar fights when I had a law license and it could have been taken away from me for doing so. I mean, like, I'm stupid sometimes. I'm an idiot. I make some really stupid choices. But that same person that's kind of stupid and kind of makes some bad choices sometimes makes me absolutely fearless in the courtroom.
We can see that for sure.
Yeah, if I'm in trouble in Louisiana, I know who I'm calling. You're the guy that I want.
I appreciate that. That's kind of you. Thank you.
If anything, what can be done to help reduce the chances of having other children endure what Anthony went through?
Pay attention. it's so easy to get focused on our own lives and to put on blinders as to what's happening around us. It's so easy to be consumed by our disagreements or disgruntlements or the things that make us unhappy. It's so easy to focus on those things instead of sort of taking a step back and looking at what's going on around you. And so many people in this case did not do that. And what we saw were a few people do it. Like we saw Elena Fennell do that. We saw Shania Landry do that. And you can see the power of caring. You can see the power of paying attention. And those people that paid attention made a massive difference in his life. And so what I would invite people to do is pay attention. Just take a look around you and see what's going on. And when you see something that's not right, don't overreact. Don't accuse people of crazy stuff, but continue to pay attention. Take a note of it. Figure out what's happening. If it needs some attention, then pay the kind of attention it needs to be paid.
That's great advice. That's a great advice.
That's really what my takeaway is from this whole experience.
Well, Jarrett, what's next for you? I mean, do you have a book in you about your experience with this case?
Yeah, there's no way I'm writing a book.
That's a definitive answer.
Sitting down and writing. Oh my Lord, I can't imagine sitting down and writing a book. We're standing up a podcast here in my office for the purpose of bringing some more clarity to the forensic science community. In fact, tomorrow afternoon, I'm making a presentation to the Criminal Justice Committee for the Bar Association for the state of Louisiana on the possibility of creating a forensic science commission in Louisiana.
Right.
Similar to what they do in Texas and Arkansas and other places, because that's kind of my plight these days. I know that doesn't get covered in the Netflix documentary, but really a lot of my practice is making the forensic science fight, challenging DNA, challenging probabilistic genotyping software, challenging, the admission of nonsense forensic science like voice impression testimony and not, just crazy voodoo science, nuts, really nuts stuff. And to me, the greatest single injustice that's occurring in our criminal justice system today is the offering of forensic science evidence without challenge against defendants all over the country.
For sure.
How do we bring those resources to defendants? How do we get that into the public defense system? How do we engage and educate and train frontline attorneys, defenders, public defenders, and private attorneys to understand that forensic science evidence is not the word of God, that it can be challenged. It is not a death blow to your case, and you can win and walk clients who are not guilty of crimes, despite the fact that there's some forensic science evidence out there that may point to their admission. As you all well know, all forensic science evidence is circumstantial, every single bit of it. And so circumstantial cases are serious, right? And we have to, I don't know what the circumstantial, the rule is in your jurisdiction, but a circumstantial case has to be proven to the exclusion of all reasonable hypothesis of innocence. And so how do we get attorneys at the front line to understand forensic science to the degree that they can create a reasonable hypothesis of innocence that includes an explanation of the forensic science evidence? And that's really my plight these days. That's where I'm at. That's really my sort of mission right now is how do we educate, how do we train, how do we bring that to the bar, to the community, to the legal community?
Well, that's fantastic because it's indeed sorely needed.
Yeah. Jarrett, full transparency, we weren't really sure what to expect in our interview with you today, but I got to tell you, it was fascinating and it was a pleasure speaking with you. You're truly an inspiration and an excellent model of what a criminal defense attorney should be. And we want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to spend time with us today.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you letting me talk here and run my mouth about some things that are special to me. And I appreciate your interest in Anthony and the case. Thank you very much.
Best of luck to both of you.
Yes, sir.
Well, Dion, I harp on this a lot. I say it again and again and again. But man, oh man, oh man. I mean, if you're a criminal defendant and you don't have the right lawyer, things can go south really, really quick when you're facing a DA's office that has tons of resources and power and all of that kind of good stuff.
It's not that I ever doubted you, Mehul, but to hear it from somebody else, in almost all the way across the country in Louisiana,
it's universal.
was absolutely amazing to hear. It was really wild. He literally everything that you've told me, he said the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's scary. If you just don't have that good advocate, man, bad things happen.
Well, you need guys like you and guys like Jarrett involved to make sure that, your clients aren't getting railroaded.
This is true.
It was just really incredible to hear how Jarrett was made for this case. Yeah. And it just seemed, I think he even mentioned it, just like destined, or it was fate for him to save Anthony from an unjust fate. He really is a powerhouse in a lot of ways. He was really inspiring to listen to.
Yeah, he is. I mean, what a great guy to talk to. I mean, not just about the Templet case, but just getting his views on
life.
On life, yeah, and really just on criminal defense, on the landscape in Louisiana for the law, and just the law in general. I also really recommend that our listeners check out the interview that Jarrett did with Anthony Templet. So it's on Jarrett's YouTube page, I believe, and it was just a few weeks ago. And when you watch that, it becomes clear that Jarrett's work is not done, and that very admirably, again, it seems like he's chosen to be a mentor for Anthony, and really, Dion, he's a damn good one at that.
Yeah, I'll go a step further. He's taken on a, kind of a little bit of a father figure for him, and I think that
for sure
that Anthony absolutely needs that right now, in my humble opinion. And you could even see during the interview, he kind of corrals him back, and Jarrett for sure understands that Anthony is getting an amazing opportunity and a second chance in life, and I just think he wants him to get the most out of that.
All right, Dan, there's something that's been eating me up since I saw the documentary, and this is a little bit lighthearted, so I didn't bring it up with Jarrett. It might be a little frivolous, but how you look at people who are maybe evil or doing evil things, and you just try to look at them physically and see if there's any clue. The thing that got me with Bert Templet was that mustache. He had that bizarre, thin,
a little bit of porn 80s porn look to him.
The 80s porn mustache that throughout the years he kept it. I don't know. That just made him suspect.
Doing coke and the porn mustache. Something not
come
right.
On, it's like the starter kit. But anyway, back to serious business. Check it out for yourself. Check out Netflix's I Just Killed My Dad. It's a 3-parter. It goes pretty quick. Each episode's about 45 minutes. And if you want to learn more about Jarrett Ambeau, or God forbid you need his services, check out ambeaulaw.com. And Jarrett's also on Instagram at Jarrett Ambeau. And he posts a lot of good content on LinkedIn and Twitter as well.
What did he say that, was it 80,000 or 20,000 in Instagram new followers in 1 month? It just
obviously, when that show hit, his IG blew up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest in this whole saga.
We hope you enjoyed our chat with Jarrett. Be sure to check out all of our episodes at crimeredefined.com. We're actually going to have some news in the near future on crimeredefined.com.
Yeah. Upgrades.
Yeah, absolutely. We've also got a bunch more content in the can that we can't wait for you to hear. It's a series coming out on another really cool wrongful conviction.
Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.